So real quick, just how the heck does like DEP come together and kind of build what it does? So first, it's code aware. So it looks at all your imports and figures out like, oh, you need this and you need package errors, etc. It knows you don't need to like statically define it somewhere else. And then it has a configuration file, which we call a manifest. It's gopackage.toml. And it has a bunch of different optional things you can set in there to kind of restrict what the heck DEP does. And then, so DEP takes those two pieces of information and spits out a lock file. And that lock file, if you're familiar with like Bundler or anything like that, it's pretty similar. It just says, here's the revision it picked. Here's the version, where did all this information come from? And it's for all your dependencies at that point, not just the one in your imports, but the dependency of your dependency of your dependency. So using all that information then, DEP populates your vendor directory, and you're ready to go. So let's take a look at what the manifest has inside of it. There's a whole bunch of different flags and things you can do. But I mean, the really important stuff is the constraints. And this is what limits what DEP looks at when it picks, hey, which version should I use for X, Y, or Z? So you give it the package name. You say, maybe I'm using a fork. How do I use a fork? How do I use like my private GitHub Enterprise mirror, things like that? You can just put that in there as the source. And then you specify a version using semver, semantic versioning. Or if maybe one of your dependencies isn't that cool yet, it's not using semver, so you can just specify a branch, like I just want to follow master. This file is maintained and hand-edited by you for the most part. The tooling doesn't really touch it. So its little mate is lock, gopackage.lock. And this lists out basically what it solved for. DEP came up with something and said, OK, as of Tuesday, this is all the things that work with your code. And you may notice something kind of oddball right away. So let's take a look at DEP test right here. It has version 081. Wait a second. I said 080. And this is master, and this says, 7.1. So what happened there? The trick you need to understand is that they're more like guidelines. You're going to see a version in there, and what DEP is doing under the covers is treating those as ranges. And there's a reason why. It's not just like mess with your mind or anything like that. DEP has to work when everybody in this room, everyone in the community has set up releases on their libraries, and people start using them. And if I pin every one of my dependencies to 081 or whatever, things will stop working very quickly. You'll try to bring in a dependency, and it'll be incompatible with some other dependency somewhere else. So DEP encourages you to kind of stick to a loose range. And the way these ranges work is, say 1, 2, 3. If you just put in the string 1, 2, 3, it's actually going to pin it, or not pin it, but it's going to restrict it up to version 2.0. So if you really want to be, for some reason, maybe you really need to pin, and Sam will stab you with a fork if you do this. But if you want to, put an equal sign in your manifest and say, I really want just this version. So the last thing that kind of goes as part of like, these are all the things DEP does, is it takes over your vendor directory completely. So it's owned by DEP. If you check stuff in there and you modify things, the next time you run DEP, it's gone. So don't complain to me when that happens. And if you want to check in your vendor directory, I'm sure you'll get a thumbs up and a little like gold star, but you don't have to. So DEP init is where you start. It basically bootstraps your whole project, just like git init, and says, all right, I'm going to use DEP now from now on. And I'm pretty sure it works. And if it doesn't, come yell at me on Slack or GitHub. So let's walk through a couple examples of like, I have code. I haven't touched it in 6 months. I haven't cloned it on my machine. There's nothing there. I pull it down, and I'm going to do DEP for this project I wrote 6 months ago. I run DEP init. It's going to go through, identify all your dependencies. What are your imports? It's going to look to see if your dependencies use DEP as well. It's going to look for that gopackage.toml and use that to find the right version that works for everybody. And it's going to pick the highest compatible release, or tagged revision, for each one of your dependencies. Not the highest revision. It's going to try to get you on real releases. So for a lot of us, though, we're using Glide, we're using GDB, we're using GoDep. DEP init is aware of 2 of them right now, but maybe after the community day it'll know more. It knows glide, and it knows godep. And what it'll do is when you run dep init without any extra flags, it'll go, oh, I see go package.toml, or sorry, glide.yaml or something like that. And it's going, I'm going to read that in and figure out what the heck you were using before. So it'll bring in your constraints. So maybe you were restricting like a set of ranges, you were trying to use a specific branch, or you were using a specific revision, and it's going to populate the lock and the manifest with all that for you. And then if it wasn't like fully baked, dep fills in the blanks. So let's say, though, that you're one of those really cool people whose Go path is in a steaming pile, and those are the right versions in there, which is great for you. I don't have that. So you can pass in .gopath at that point. And what that'll do is, instead of dep going off into la la land, looking up on GitHub, finding the latest versions, what it's going to do instead is go, oh, I see in your Go path you're using package errors, and it's on version 0.7. It's going to grab and use that instead in the lock and in the manifest. And if you don't have everything in your Go path, again, it fills in the blanks for you. That's basically for it works on my machine, and I'd like to make it work elsewhere. So let's say you're one of those really cool people, and maybe you work at Google or something, and you actually bothered to vendor everything. That's actually the hard mode for dep, unfortunately. So what dep will do is we'll back up vendor and go put it over there so we don't ruin your life. And then what dep is going to do is do a standard init like what you saw for a fresh repo. It's going to spit out config files, and they won't reflect what's in vendor. It's an exercise left to the reader to figure out what they were using, and then update those files and make it work. Sorry. So the next command that's your friend is dep ensure, and it's for people who don't check in vendor, and so every time you do a clone, you need to run dep ensure to populate vendor. And it's also the command you run every time you touch the manifest, and it'll update your lock and repopulate vendor for you. DEP status is another one. You don't use it a lot often. It's more like something's not working right. Let's go see what dep thinks is going on. So in this case, I've got semver as one of my packages. It's relying on a branch. I'm looking at VCS. It's relying on a semver. And then say go radix. I didn't care. It was whatever. I would just need it, but I don't care about the version. And it also tells you if you're up to date on the latest revision that's out there or not. So let's just walk through how do I use dep real quick. If I want to add a dependency, just import it, start using it, run dep ensure, ta-da, and it's all populated, and you can check your lock-in. If you use an IDE like Goglane, though, and you want IntelliSense and all that, import it, save the file, run dep ensure, and then hotfoot back over to your IDE, and IntelliSense and autocomplete will work. To update a dependency, -n will give you a dry run, which is awesome because you don't know what the heck dep's going to do. Sometimes we don't know what dep's going to do, but -update with nothing else just updates all of your direct dependencies. If you can give it a specific package, like Carolyn loves ponies, it'll just update that one. Or you can tell it to go to a specific version. If you want to remove it, kick it out, run dep ensure, and do a little housekeeping on your manifest. If you want to test uncommitted changes, so maybe you're working on 2 packages at the same time, this is just rely on how Go works. Kill it out of your vendor, don't run dep for a little bit so it doesn't put it back in there, and move on with your life. If you need something longer term than that, use a fork. The floor is lava. So a couple things totally work. The config file isn't going to change, and it works enough that I'm asking for bugs if it doesn't work. And dep ensure has a big honking pull request that's going to come through pretty soon and change the world. So only use what I just showed you. If you're wondering what some of the sigils and things you can use, what's a carrot, check out the Mastermind semver package. And otherwise, please use it and come visit us later to kind of try it out and let me know how it works. Thanks.